So thank you for staying towards the end of the day. I just want to say before I begin that I saw Barry talk in Cairns in 2011 and it was inspirational, and every now and again when I think, geez, this is all a bit tough and I should try my hand at golf or spend more time at home with the kids or something, I think of Barry's work.
Just for fun, he's actually doing another talk in Cairns today,
Yeah.
that's why I'm here.
Good on him. And it's a fantastic project, and it is only 1,000 kilometres north of where I practice, and the rates of maternal death between the two communities couldn't be more stark. And we're responsible for lots of terrible stuff here in Australia, but the abandonment of New Guinea in 1975 was one of the most appalling things we've ever done. Speaking of appalling things that we collectively might do, thank you for coming along this afternoon, and this talk comes with a huge trigger warning, and please use your phone, leave, do whatever you need to do, but look after yourselves as we broach a few topics fairly quickly. I was anticipating a 90-minute workshop with all the boffins, and I was expecting them to workshop up and form so the abstract in the app is absolutely nothing like what we're going to do. I'm going to try and cover in 20 minutes a bit of the story of the last, I suppose, collective 10 years, but probably 50 years of my life. So the topic to sort of get through, because it's been rejected at a few conferences, was to try to make an allusion to a cultural challenge. And I met somebody who makes rockets in Alabama who says to say hi. And so I think we do have a collective problem in medicine all over the world, and certainly in Australia. And this is I nicked this off a lovely last picture of a SBS thing, just how mad are you? I recommend that, but it's got the phone numbers. And so if anybody needs them, please use them. You'll know if you need them. This is thousands of doctors, lots of carers and stuff, but if you don't talk to anybody, at least ring up one of these people and talk to them. So yeah, we do have a problem, and if we say it, if we dare name it, it's violence. I'm sort of dragged into this conference through the gender equity lens, and I get a bit of criticism about it being a bit bandwagoning, but I think it's a huge concern. And I do want, for those of you with a sociology background and those of you who like to know where to start, standpoint feminism is ideal place to go. And Sandra Harding, not the boss at JCU, the other actual Sandra Harding, her work is a bit dense, but it's fantastic stuff. And those of you who've read some of it, good on you. And thanks for being here. We've got a big challenge that has been outlined by Louise Stone in her work. Now, it's published in the MJA, and those of you who can't afford the $1,200 can't get it. And so I brought a copy. If anybody wants it, I was going to make multiple copies, but I didn't. And so I've brought a copy of Louise's paper from 2015. And that she looks at the rates of sexual violence experienced by trainees in the medicine field. And so when you combine, are we particularly bad in Australia? We're not that great, but no, we're no worse than anywhere else where it's ever been measured. And Finesa's work from Europe confirms Louise's data in Australia that it's double the community rate for gender-based violence, and consultants are the main offenders. And the other bit that sort of bothers me about violence from doctors is violence from doctors against themselves. And I've just sort of flown back through a wild tour of the United States, and when I spoke to them, everybody knows the 22 a day figure. And so when you do, I was going to have a slide up here of epidemiology. I don't know if anybody's ever seen me present before, but whenever I talk about epidemiology, everybody just goes to sleep. And so my epidemiology, sort of back of the handbook numbers, there's 22 million active and veteran United States servicemen, service people, service members, I think they call themselves, and 22 a day. There's 1.2 million medical practitioners in the United States and 400 a year. It's about the same ballpark figure. And the danger of this is that we won't do anything at all, and systems of power are in place to maintain the status quo. I think we actually have an opportunity, and I love ACRM. ACRM is the college where the members get to do stuff and get to make a difference. And so we actually could take the ball and design something that might actually work. Challenge is how to go about doing that. And I brought a book from the Prevention Institute, and there's a picture on the next page in the handout, because I don't know how it'll translate or how easy it is to read, but you'll be able to sort of follow on and look at the two different paradigms that people use to create prevention systems. We're really good at the risk paradigm. And it does work. And I think the opportunities for us are to pursue things based around the resilience paradigm of prevention processes. I stuck in Graeber there because I brought it too. Don't anybody nick Graeber. I can probably get a copy of the prevention book if somebody really wants to steal it, but Graeber's a bit harder to come by. And his sort of the stupidity of bureaucracy, which is wonderful. But our challenge as practitioners, and what we do is design, even though we've probably never been formally trained in design, but we design things for people to do in the future based on imperfect information. But our real challenge is not to be conservative right-wingers or radical nuff-nuff left-wingers, is to actually recognise that both left and right are stuck in maintaining the status quo, but the truly radical thing is to create realistic hope for somebody else. And I think that's what we have the opportunity to do. So in that terrible slide, it's the bottom paragraph that I wanted you to be able to read, which is why the handout. And so the opportunity to look at stuff that comes out of the risk paradigm for design versus the opportunities that we have if we embrace a more resilience approach. Anybody actually reading it? Can I click it on? Wave your hands when you want me to click. Good, thanks. So the risk stuff is the stuff that you're familiar. If you're in this room, it's probably because you're a bit familiar with this stuff anyway, and you probably recognise the Our Women and Their Children label. And that's a fantastically well-resourced process. It's got Natasha Stott-DeSawyer as the champion and the head, and it's producing great stuff, and it's aiming at gender equity by community education, and it's adopting very much a well-informed, evidence-based approach, but it's stuck way inside the risk process, and it's pretty cool. But I'm a bit frustrated about the likelihood of it to develop a clinically useful tool for me that's going to help me tomorrow afternoon at 3:45 with somebody who I think could help, who needs some decent, focused, reasonable education. And that isn't just the perpetrators. Sometimes people come up to me and say, "You're the DV doctor, you're just trying to get them off." And it's not true. I probably create more evidence and send more people to jail than most people in this room, but that's because I see a lot of people who need to go. But we also see all of the kids. We see the 3-year-olds and the 5-year-olds and the 8-year-olds and the 12-year-olds a long time before they become perpetrators. And they're the ones that I think we really have a chance to make a difference with. The Queensland Health Training, I did ask a couple of our junior doctors in a very unscientific, absolutely no correlations, I've got no p-values, but I say, you've sat through the training, what was the essential message? And about gender equity and the dangers of the workplace, it was essentially suck it up. So make an anonymous complaint, hope that other people have made an anonymous complaint, hope that somebody gets somebody dragged in, and essentially what that happens is in a month and a half somebody comes out and says somebody misinterpreted something that I said, so it doesn't do anything except maintain the status quo. I think it's terrible. The risk profile does, if the resources are focused, it works like a charm. High Point, North Carolina, a fantastic example of this. They presented an enormous project at the conference that I just come back from in the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence conference. They stratify everybody into A, B, C and D. To get into D, you have to have multiple breaches of multiple intervention orders, you have to have used a weapon, you have to have been arrested, you have to have probably been incarcerated. They get those guys in, and they're almost always guys. They sit them around, they get a big table, the judge is there, the prosecution's there, the police are there, the feds, state and local police, and they say to them, we know who you are, we're watching you, if we come to you we will do everything we can to put you away for whatever we can for as long as possible. And they've taken 16 murders in 1 year, 9 years ago, to 1 murder in the last 5. You have to live under a rock in Australia to not know that we've got a problem here. Population of North Point's about 600,000, and so they've They had a big problem, a big population. They've put in a big effort. To me, it's fantastic, but when I talk to prosecutors in Australia and police in Australia, they think, well, we're just not going to get that layer of coordination. And to me too, it leaves the people that are suffering the level A, level B and level C problems on their own. Yeah, in Australia we leave everybody A, B, C and D on their own, but it's a challenge. If you are going to treat people as inanimate objects, you really have to do it well, and there's a place for that, and I think that's appropriate. However, we can be a bit clever and look at some other stuff. That resilience approach, and this is probably where you need to go back to the thing to remind yourself of what it is. There's some really good examples of that and really big organisations that have been doing it for a long time. The Prevention Institute has 40 years of all sorts of stuff. The reason why your car is much safer is because of the work that the people who started the Prevention Institute have done. You know, collapsing steering wheels, suspension that works, and collapsing stuff. Design prevention opportunities really do make a big difference. The Futures Without Violence is up there. They're a fantastic online resource for just about almost everything. Challenge is that it's pages and pages and pages of stuff, and if you've got 10 minutes to get through and it's a minor opportunity that you're taking a chance to, it's not really quick enough to get stuff easily. But it's there. The big plug, and it's this month, so it's hot off the press literature, is for the National Centre for Shaken Baby Syndrome Prevention's Purple Crying program. Those of you who've been to Cooktown will know that we've been using that program since the birthing service reopened. The published data that's come out of British Columbia that's being published this month is that it works. The incidence of shaken baby syndrome has gone down amongst families who've received it, and over 90% of the families in British Columbia receive it by 35%. The other wonderful thing that isn't in the paper but is part of their grey literature around it is that all-cause physical harm presentations to emergency departments in British Columbia have gone down by 50%. So something especially fabulous about having a new baby that makes your brain want to learn new skills. If you leap in there and teach people carer skills and soothing skills and about the normal crying experience that they can expect in the next 4 months, you generate an expectation of capacity amongst the parents, especially amongst the fathers, and it rolls along and things become beautiful about that. The next line in is a plug for the In Safe Hands project, which I'm being sponsored by the RDAQ Foundation to create. And later on, I've got it completely wrong. It's not in Brisbane, it's in Cairns. So we'll see you in Cairns, not in Brisbane, in June next year. And that will include a couple of the resources. One of the things coming on the next slide is supposed to make it easy for us to take the opportunities to explore potential future violence and what to do. The other sort of plug at this point is that we're not talking about stuff that people don't know about. And so people who come for care, lots of them have usually got an experience of some form of harm, and especially children. So we don't have to pussyfoot around talking about this stuff. We do have to raise it respectfully and kindly. There's a whole beautiful world of trauma and survivor-informed care. I do think that's something that we should be much more capable of speaking about. I'm just going to mention it because to try and do it justice in the next few minutes is probably more harmful than good. The difference between resilience, which treats people as inanimate objects, is that the risk one is this is what you will do and this is what will happen to you, very mechanical. The resilience project is to try and do stuff before you need it, before anybody's become a perpetrator. It's treating people as people. I was going to say what we do all the time, but it would be, sometimes we do treat each other as equals. It would be kind of cool if we did it more often, and that's the whole Our Watch project. My kids come from 6 generations of feminist warriors, and they haven't found much measurable change in all of that life of perpetuated awareness raising. So we can talk a lot about the Women's Temperance League, the Women's Electoral Lobby, the Women's College, and I don't know how many other of you have got in the family cupboard somewhere at home the Temperance League sherry. It's good for places and spaces that are safe for women to be together without the interference of the power structures in their culture. This is the Cooktown 10. It's a model of primary violence prevention. It's a generic analysis of why the Purple Crying program works, and I've taken it around all of those people who are clever and been doing this for a long time, and it's got what I think now is face construct and content validity. So you're all clever. The essence is the 6 petals in the middle. If those 6 factors come together in the one situation with the one person, and all 6 are above a specific threshold, it's on the back of the cards and it's on all the handouts, so you don't have to squeeze to try and read it. All 6 of those have to be present for an episode of violence to ensue. And so the thesis is, if we can make just one of those soft enough to delay the moment of violence, we actually make it harder to act violently, and so we might delay it for long enough. Pretty well the same model that we use for knee arthritis and knee replacements. If we wait for everybody to understand gender equity, we'll be waiting a few more generations yet. If we just make it harder for people to act violently, we might get somewhere with some people much more quickly. If, in fact, you get down the stem to the act of violence, you can never return back over to the normal processes of life that go on no matter what culture you're in, no matter how much resources you've got. And you're stuck over here, and this is the Duluth wheel. So you've all... So remember back on the risk slide, the Duluth model, the Duluth in northern Minnesota, and the Duluth wheel. It's very good at saying what has happened. It's very hard to use the Duluth model, which is all aimed at perpetrator behaviour change programs. But I think it's too late. I think the violence has happened, the relationship's never going back to a time where nobody can remember it being violent. I think your relationship's over once you've had violence. You're in a situation of violence, but you're not in a relationship anymore. And the Duluth wheel of disaster sits on this side, which just reinforces your prejudice, just makes it easier and easier and easier for you to do. And you get up to level D if that's the sort of inability you have to manage your frustrations, to manage your sense of isolation, to manage your desperation. But if we can recognise those 6 factors coming towards any type of violence and keep one of them soft enough not to achieve it, then you do something else and you move away and you go back over there to normal life. So I think, I was kind of hoping we'd have a whole lot of the managing boffins in the room, so thank you for being so polite. Really from this point, Queensland Health and their Rural Generalist program really is on notice. ACRM and are in Queensland, every GP trainee either trains through ACRM or the RSCGP, and JCU and GMT get kids from school leaving until their mid-30s when they're finally through their fellowships. Late 20s if they're spectacularly clever and very well organised. But they manage every aspect of every emergent doctor's training and working lives, and suck it up is just not an appropriate response. So what I think we should do, and you heard it here first, I'm part of a little gang that's going to present this, hopefully with a bit of luck if we get accepted, at the American Society of Anesthesiology, and it's to look at more effective and more masterful capacity for the anaesthetists who are going to move into an emerging perioperative physician role. And building on Louise Stone's work, the anaesthetist already is a very effective interventionist bystander for the patient. It's a very small intellectual leap to become the consummate interventionist bystander for everybody involved in the theatre experience. And so the rural generalists, all of us in the room and all of us on the training and all of us here are interested in ACRM stuff. We already do anaesthetics a little bit. We don't have to be great at it, we just do it a little bit. And we can do this a little bit. We can see ourselves as effective perioperative physicians when there is nobody else to do that role. And one of those things that can expand to include, without being afraid of the consequences of that, because you're already an anaesthetist, you're already a rural generalist, you're already safe and secure in your environment. you can look out for others in it. And the key thing for the American anaesthesiologists, what they say is that our work is unpredictable. We have to be ready to manage the next unpredictable event. And that's a sort of a definition of rural generalism. The work they do with the patient, the work we do with the people who come for care is protect and preserve, honour and nurture them and their vulnerability, especially if they're anaesthetised. But it's a very small intellectual leap for me to include everybody who's there in the theatre experience, which is the whole healthcare experience. Those who are there learning and working and those who are receiving services. And because I like making stuff simple, this is the ethic, do no harm. And then with the trauma and survivor-informed ethic, listen to, believe, and then with the consent of the person, provide appropriate help and assistance. And the thing we need to do structurally and systemically is speak up and act to stop ongoing abuse. So, moving forward, everybody's noticed the lovely logo in the top corner that keeps bouncing around the Violence Prevention Australia. This is an organisation we've generated almost to the one autograph left to go for deductible gift recipient status, which is the Thor service sort of status there. Somebody reminded me when they looked through these slides that I'm supposed to do a workshop. There's a bunch of postcards that if you want to have a workshop activity, so you feel like you've workshopped something, can you write your name and address on it and something you'd like to do in your workplace, and I'll write it back to you in January or February and we'll see where we get. And that was Torren's suggestion, if anybody wants to know. So it's at the front if anybody'd like it. Cool. And just a reminder too, that when prevention fails, we've already got a great suite of responses. This is not a talk about what to do when somebody comes or how to approach this stuff. This is about stopping people being violent. If, in fact, somebody's come to you, the first thing to do is start by believing. And that's a wonderful organisation. If you look up Google, Start by Believing, but that's the step. When somebody is not believed, that often is the thing that keeps them away from care for the rest of their lives. If somebody is trusting you enough to divulge that they've been harmed, believe them. Start by believing. And then there's the RACGP White Book that's available and freely available to everybody. You don't have to be an RACGP member. There's all the great work of Kelsey Hegarty's group at University of Melbourne. There's the DV training model in Akron. For each of us and for everybody in this room, especially people coming up, get a GP you can talk to. This is vital. And the trick, the rule for doctors is find a GP who drinks more than you do. And this is wrong. It's in Cairns. I'll see you at the RDAQ in Brisbane. And so please, the Violence Prevention Australia organisation would love any feedback at all about this approach and these processes, and everybody is welcome to be part of it, and please do. I think we have the opportunity to design ways that make the likelihood of that terrible statistic about physician suicide or doctor-on-doctor abuse. Now, whether this Cooktown 10 model is adopted by anybody at all, it doesn't matter a blind bugger, but what happens is that those 6 factors will be softened, at least one of them, in every delayed instance of violence that's put off or doesn't occur. Whether we explicitly use that model, whether there's somewhere much, much better. And just thank you so much for your time and for coming along. That's the other reason why I have to take the business cards is they're now out of date. So they have to go. I don't know how many cupboards full of old business cards you other people have collected, but I have too many. But the last thing, the Akron message, in remote practice, if we don't do it, nobody else is going to. So in remote practice, it's us or it's no one. And please, can't apologise enough to anybody in the room who's been reminded of something revolting that happened to them. Please seek appropriate support. Don't suffer by yourself. And thank you so much for your time.